Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Again, my name is Damion Cooper, and I am the founder and executive director of an organization called Project Pneuma. And I want to tell you my story. Now, I asked you to breathe in for a little while because the story I have to tell is always hard for me to tell. And it's late in the hour, so it's extra hard because I'm going to have to go home with this on my spirit. So, back in 1992, I was a scholarship wrestler at Coppin State University. And on one night, I decided I didn't want to stay on campus, and I wanted to go home because my mother had made my very favorite meal. She made spare ribs, collard greens, sweet potatoes, cornbread, and had some tea. So I decided to take the bus from Coppin State College all the way across town to Northeast Baltimore. And I was born and raised in the projects of East Baltimore, so me traveling didn't make a difference to me. When I got off the bus, I had on headphones, and I made my way home. But unbeknown to me, it was two guys following me. As I got right beside my house, about to go into the house, I felt someone behind me. And when I turned around, no words were exchanged. One guy took out his gun and pulled the trigger. He shot me inch above the heart. The ricochet cracked my sternum. Ricocheted and broke 3 ribs, and ricocheted and lodged under the nerves under my right arm. And I managed to make it into the house with the help of my stepfather because he heard the gunshot. During this time, I had no idea that I was shot. I was in shock. He had to really get me to realize what was going on because the only thing I realized is that they put a hole in my jacket. In the house at the time was my mother and my sister, who was 7 months pregnant. And so he decided to take me up the stairs where we had a full-length mirror to try to really get me to see what was going on. He had to lock my sister in her room, who was losing her mind because her only brother was basically dying right there in front of the family. My mother was in her room, and the only thing I can remember is watching my mother rock back and forth on her bed because her only son was basically bleeding out in front of her. And by the grace of God, as you can see, I'm here, that I survived that night. But the thing is this, when I was growing up, I was the consummate good boy. I was a kid who went to Catholic school, I was the lead altar boy, I was a good kid. I was a kid who made it out of the projects. I was a kid who got the full scholarship to go to college. I was that kid. But after I got shot, all that stopped. I became a very angry and bitter young man. I became that young man that we always hear about and see about on the news and the newspapers. I became that young man who was messed up with toxic masculinity because in the neighborhood I grew up in, you never showed fear or harm, no matter how bad you hurt on the inside. And so I became this antithesis of myself to the point where I wanted to take my own life. So I was shot on October 13, 1992, but on December 31st, 1996, I decided I could no longer take the emotional and the mental pain. The physical pain was nothing compared to what was happening here and to what's happening here. And Brother Sadiq kind of mentioned some of that when he was talking. So I decided I was going to take my own life the same way that God tried to take my life. So I went to my mother and stepdad's house and I broke into his lockbox and I stole his gun. And I know in Baltimore and probably in other cities across the United States, at midnight on New Year's Eve, everybody's going to start shooting off their guns. So I figured if I shot myself at midnight, no one would know, no one would be the wiser, and no one would find me. Luckily for me, 2 of my friends who didn't know what I was going to do decided to come ring my doorbell that night and ask me to go to church. The last place I wanted to go because I blame God, Bishop, for me getting shot. I blame God that he took away my wrestling scholarship. I blame God that I can no longer wrestle or do martial arts. I blame God for everything. So the last thing I'm going to do is go to some church and pray some God I didn't believe in no more. So they kept ringing my doorbell, until my neighbor upstairs came and banged on my door and said, Damien, you need to open this door because I got to work 11 to 7. So I let my friends in, and they decided to go in on me about going to church with them. To the point where I said, you know what, fine, shut up, I'll go. Just for them to shut up. And he took me to a church 4 blocks away from where I was shot. We get to this church, and the pastor of the church was the man that I know all my life and who I admired as one of my mentors. But I never knew he was a pastor. He brought in a guest preacher by the name of Reverend Michael Coles, who came in very unassuming and just preached a good word from Psalms 30, verse 5. For his anger endureth but a moment, and his favor is life. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. And what he said is this, and I'm looking at all these wonderfully dressed, beautiful black people in here right now. What Reverend Michael Cole said was that he said, I don't care how much money you have, what stature on life, whatever's going on, we're all going to go through a night season. He said, we're going to go through that period of life when you don't think you can take another step. We don't think you can make it another day. When the mask that you've been wearing for so long finally comes off. We're going to go through that time. So just like everybody here, and again, how we're looking great, we've all been through that time, or we're going to go through that time, or your time is coming. And so as he's doing this sermon, and I'm sitting there angry, just so angry, he's talking, and it's finally starting to permeate my heart. And he simply ends the sermon off by saying, we're going to kneel down, we're going to pray in the new year. I've never been an emotional man. When I got shot, I didn't cry. I've seen a lot of people get killed and destroyed in my own neighborhood. I didn't cry. But this night when he said, we're going to pray in the new year, we're not going to pull you down to the front of church because we don't want you to feel compelled to say a lot of yeses in front of people you don't even know. So he said, if you kneel down and pray, and you raise your hand, someone to come get you. And at this point in time in my life, I broke down into an ugly cry. Has anybody ever had an ugly cry before? I mean, let's be sure. Raise your hand if you ever had an ugly cry when snot is coming out your nose, you dry heaving, and you can't get yourself together. Let's just be real. Like I said, it's great to be in this kind of place and do this kind of stuff, but let's just be real for a second. I was broken, and I cried my heart out all over this preacher's robe, messed it up. And on this night, I decided to forgive the man that shot me, even though I didn't know who he was and why he did it. Years later in seminary, I started doing work in the prison ministry. And unbeknown to me, for a year and a half, I was mentoring the very man that shot me. It wasn't until we started putting 1 and 2 together, 1 and 2 together, 1 and 2 together, where things just kept coming up too much that were the same. So I begged the chaplain of the Baltimore State Correctional Center, can I talk to this man? And if you ever worked in a prison, you can't have a personal relationship with an inmate. So he's supposed to pull me from the program. But I'm begging this man, like Keith Sweat begging the women on stage, to talk to this man. So he allows me to talk to this guy, but only I can ask him open-ended questions. So I asked him, have you done anything that you weren't convicted of? Have you done anything that you're not proud of, that you're ashamed of? And so I sit there and I listen to this man say the first thing, which was nothing. Second thing, nothing. Third thing, nothing. And the fourth thing, imagine having the man look you in your face and say, yo, we followed this dude with the number 5 bus. We watched him cross the street. He went over across the street to St. Cloudling Elementary School. And he walked up the steps around the corner. Yeah, we was going to bust him then, but this white dude was walking his dog down the street. So we hid back in a cut. We watched this dude cross the grass, hop over the gate, cross over Chesterfield. Walk up this street called Emily and load down the little alley street. Yeah, we followed this dude all the way down to the end to where Lindale Avenue was. And that's when my boy said, yo, if you're going to do it, you got to bust him down because you know there's a buster right there and that's where all the lights are. So we ran up on this fool. When he turned around, I blasted him. stood up and I unbuttoned my shirt and I pulled down my t-shirt and I said, "You shot me. You shot the man who was getting you ready to leave this prison. You tried to kill the man who was trying to save your life as you walk out in these streets. I'm that man." And then I did the second hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I stood up and I walked around the table and I hugged them and I said, "I forgive you." And I continue to work with this guy every single week. Every single Saturday I talk to him. He's now out of prison with 2 kids. He's the head of his men's ministry in his church, which is a mile away from my church. He has his AA degree from Baltimore City Community College. I mentor the man that shot me. I mentor the man that wanted me dead. And so when God blessed me to see another day, another chance, not a second chance, another chance, I know I need to do something for the boys in Baltimore. So God blessed me to start an organization called Project Pneuma. Pneuma comes from the Greek word pneumatology, study of Holy Spirit. Pneuma means wind, breath, spirit, breath of life. So what I'm going to do is breathe new life into these young men who don't see life anymore. In 2014, we started with 25 boys before the Freddie Gray incident happened. And we partnered our boys up with the Baltimore City Police Department to break up the negative stereotype that kids of color and cops can't coexist. Our boys train at the police academy with the recruits every single Tuesday and Thursday. Sadiq, you said, can we name one? I can name 101. We start with 25 in 2014. Last year we ended off with 101. And to date, we have a wait list of over 370 boys who want to get in. That's legacy. Like I said, it's great to be dressed up and to look nice, but to be straight up, I could have came in with jeans on a Project Pneuma shirt, looking to talk to every single young boy in here, because that's my love and that's my passion. Getting on the stage is cool and all, but my job is to help save lives. And I thank God Almighty that I have a best friend like Damien Myers who decided to come alongside of me and to do this work with me. This man was a doctor, a medical doctor by trade, and gave it up. He gave it up. He gave up a lot of money to go and mentor, to give back. So as we sit in here tonight, again, and we're looking all good, and if you're not doing the work you're supposed to be doing, check yourself. Check yourself at your nice suits, your shoes, your dresses, and we need to get to work. Our children are dying every single day. Every day. I am a preacher. I'm an ordained reverend, and I've buried 51 kids 20 and under, and I've only done funerals for anybody 50 and over 21 times. That number should be inverted. It's work to be done. This may not be the speech that you guys were expecting, but this is on my heart, because our kids are dying. They're crying out for us on a daily basis. I wish I could have brought all 101 of the boys with us tonight, because that's mentorship. They need to see this kind of stuff. We see it all the time. They need to experience this. The ones who don't see hope, who don't see value in life. This is what Impact Change is about. Let's make sure we're impacting the lives. Is this not showing up to meet, eat, and greet? You got me? And I say it in love, because I love each and every one of you like you're my play cousin. I do. But God didn't call me to a ministry of comfortability. He called me to a ministry of conviction. And I have to make sure I try to convict each and every heart in here to stand up and fight and stand in the gap for our young people, because they need us.
It's always hard for me to hear my best friend, the godfather of my children, tell a story and realize that if, you know, what I guess was supposed to happen happened, we would have never met. And I think about, you know, for selfish reasons, how that would have impacted my life. Because I met him at a time where I think we needed each other in different ways. So my story began in Detroit, Michigan. And I don't know who said it earlier, but they talked about legacy, and they said you inherit a legacy from your father, whether it's, or your parents, your father especially, whether it's positive or negative or otherwise. And that's definitely true. And so there were very low expectations for me when I was born. I'm from Detroit, Michigan. I don't know if you know anything about Detroit, but I tell people all the time, when I was growing up in Detroit, we didn't have a rolling park. We didn't have a harbor. We didn't have any pockets where wealthy people lived. All the people with money had moved out after the riots in 1968. And so I grew up, you know, essentially in poverty to a teenage mother who was a third-generation teenage mom. My mother was 16 when she had me. I am the first male in my father's family to graduate from high school in over 40 years. Because back then, they migrated from the South, and you could drop out of high school, and all my cousins and uncles, they either joined the military or they went to work in the factories, because back then, the automotive industry in Detroit was booming. So you could, you know, with overtime, essentially, you could live a middle-class life. And so I don't know how, but somehow at 16 years of age, my mother was a great mother. But it meant that she had to sacrifice all of her hopes and dreams and put them into me. So it meant that she couldn't hang out and she couldn't travel, and she dreamed of becoming a nurse. And all of that was on hold because I think somehow she realized that the pursuit of her own dreams would really thwart my own. So she put everything she had and everything she knew in me, which, you know, wasn't a lot, but love counts. Love counts a whole lot. And so I was always academically inclined because when I looked at my neighborhood, the only way that I knew out was sports. I was good at basketball, but I'm 5'9", sitting up here. But I was always pretty good in school with academics, so that's what I focused on in terms of my ticket out. And it wasn't the cool or popular thing to do, but I just knew that the neighborhood I was growing up in, I needed to get out. And I never understood how people could walk through the neighborhood I grew up in and not want to help. And that always stuck with me. And I was fortunate enough that my mother actually married my stepfather. We moved to California. And that's when I started seeing ocean and cliffs. And I remember we were driving through the mountains, and it was these, you know, humongous $10, $20 million homes with gates that you couldn't get to. And for a kid coming from Detroit, you got to understand, I'd never been outside of Detroit city limits other than to go to Cedar Point in Ohio, an amusement park, and come right back. I didn't know what a hotel looked like. I had never been on an airplane, none of that. The only thing I knew was my neighborhood. And so when I went to California, it was like opening up a new world to me, and I started to dream. And, you know, I remember my stepfather always telling me, if you continue on the road you're on, maybe you can, you know, live a good life. But when I asked him about those homes on the hills, he said, well, son, people that own homes like that don't typically work for people. People work for them. And so that kind of stuck with me. And I was fortunate enough to go to medical school, become a doctor. But when I went to medical school, I was the only American-born black male. And I started asking questions, why? And I realized that there were systemic barriers that were put in place, a lot of them financial and economic. And if you don't come from a family that's wealthy, and if you don't come from a family that's affluent, you really don't know how to navigate that pathway. And so I've essentially dedicated my life to increasing diversity in the medical field. So I stopped practicing medicine, and now I can tell you that now I'm over 400 in terms of students of color from Baltimore City that I've helped to enter into medical tracks. Medical school, nursing school, public health school. And there's a wonderful organization called B.Me. B.Me is the largest network of black male social entrepreneurs in the nation. And each year, up to 10 black males can get $10,000 to further their cause. And that brought me in 2014 to Cooper. And we became the best of friends. And a year later, Bishop Winslow joined us. And B.Me is an awesome organization because we are real men who are effectively working together to create change. So when you talk about legacy building, a lot of times we just need to take our fancy titles and put them to the wayside and just focus on the work. Don't worry about whose name is at the top. Cooper is my boss. He hates when I say that, and I guess we're supposed to be equal partners. This is my boss, and I follow his leadership. But that meant I had to shut my business down because I realized by working together, we could affect more change. I love Sadiq, I love Sharif, I love Will, I love Juan, I love all of y'all brothers, and we work together in various capacities. It might just be a phone call. But I don't think any one of you is going to be the savior of Baltimore City. But I do believe that collectively, we can change Baltimore City. So that's my charge to you all as we wrap up. Don't think about the personal gain and just focus on the work. Take your individual talent, whatever it may be, partner with somebody who's talented in other areas, and let's do this work, because that's what it's all about. I have a son and a daughter at home, and all I want to do is just run this race hard, pass this baton off, and hope that they live in a better world with better opportunities. I'm going to be fine. I've ran my race. I'm not done yet, but I need all of you in here to do your part. And Sadiq is so right when he talked about mentoring. I can name Denzel Walker, who one day will be executive director of Project Pneuma, who I've been working with since he was 19 and now he's 25. So every big meeting we go to, he's with us, because nobody taught me how to conduct myself in a boardroom with a bunch of billionaires, but he knows how. So that's my charge to you. I want to thank you for this opportunity to come and share our stories about Project Pneuma and how we came together in legacy building. This is a wonderful experience. I can tell you, my mother took the DNA test, and I'm from Western Africa, 77% Sierra Leone. She said we're from the Limba tribe. I don't know what the heck that is, but I'm going to look it up when I leave here. Love you.